Welcome in, everybody. Welcome in. No matter what time of the day or night it is a great time to be a Gamecock. I am Tony, here with Adam. Raised as gentlemen, you know it is ladies first, and the Gamecock women. We're talking basketball, and they are certainly on a roll as we've been going through the past few weeks. We got a couple big ranked matchups to recap. Another big one coming up that's going to be here in Columbia at Colonial Life Arena. But one thing that we've really seen as we've rounded the corner, we've settled into the new year, has been a lot of success of this women's team. I had the pleasure of being able to see them as they took on Texas. It was such a great amount of energy at Colonial Life. It was fantastic, and it was definitely something that was infused into the game, and we saw some of that positive energy filter over to the Alabama game, which they won on the road. So I'm really happy with what I've been seeing from this program, especially after we lost Watkins for the season. Still really sucks. Hate that happened. That's going to still be a key part, a key piece of our team that we have to continue to adjust with as the season goes on. But truly, SEC play, I've been very pleased with it right now. What do you think, my friend?
Yeah, we predicted a close game, a really close game against Texas, and for good news, it didn't have to be.
No.
It was very much a well-handled game. Alabama a little tighter throughout about three quarters, and then finally started to pull away.
Yes.
And I think you said it best. It's like we were really starting this SEC slate off strong, just not even letting these teams hang around, which is what we talk about so often, that slow start. We just haven't seen it, and I'm hoping it is a thing of the past and just something that's not even going to be on their minds anymore, because they have just been going through this schedule with a full head of steam.
Yeah, they're just rolling over some of these opponents. And one way or another, it could be with a little bit more of a downturn, a slow start, or slow quarter, if you will, here and there. The biggest thing I'm concerned about going forward, and not even concerned really, but just want to see from this team, if you're still going to go through this game, you can have a little bit more of these lapses in the second and third quarter. It'd be great to play a perfect game, but that's not going to happen all the time. What I really want to see is a strong start and a strong finish. And one of the great examples that we've seen with that as of recent has been the Alabama game. They started off with a great first quarter. They ended it with a great last quarter. The second and third, a little shaky. They let Alabama hang around a little bit, but as long as you're not having to try to reach back up to a team, fight your way back to a score, and then that's just the way that you can go through games. And I don't care how the second and third quarter go, as long as you are coming out on top, which they did against Alabama. And even though the second and third quarter were a little weaker, they still almost won by 20 points. So that it wasn't even a full, complete game. One thing, though, before we just quickly go over that and just the stats, is dialing it back a little bit to that Texas matchup, and it was just such a great defensive effort between the crowd probably helping out a little bit. I was there as well, and getting into the heads of Texas, just along with the incredible output of our players protecting the paint. It was so good. I know one thing, Adam, you just brought up to me, just going over these stats and seeing the fact that Texas is a very talented team, and Madison Booker is one of their most talented players, if not the most talented. And they held her for what, my friend?
3 for 19 on field goals for just 7 points. It was a real shutdown effort.
Tough day for Miss Booker.
Tough day at the office. Yeah, Harmon as well, 4 for 11 for 9. So just a real lack of production on the offensive side for Texas, but just really shows how much we locked them down that game.
They really did, and that's just the type of motivation and the change of pace I needed to see from a fan aspect, as opposed to someone talking and breaking down these games. But I sat in section 118, right behind one of the baskets, and just going through and really focusing on the paint when Texas was coming up the floor to score on that end. It wasn't a lot of scoring. It was trying to score, and they just really struggled in the paint. Joyce Edwards was giving them fits. They were, getting a bit more of a fit even down low, just trying to get the ball up to score. Malaysia was really getting in there. Raven Johnson looked great. She had a nice swipe. And, of course, Miss Kitts, Chloe Kitts, really keeping things in check there. And And just to this point of the season, just to know that we have that ability to still be a really good presence on a defensive side without Watkins, still really going to miss her, but it just gives me a lot of hope for the rest of the season that we don't have to worry about teams running away from us or more so exposing us down low. Perhaps if we meet UCLA again, that could be a little bit of a different story. We'll see. There's a lot of different types of talent and ways, teams that come at you. But the SEC schedule up to this point has gone about as perfect as it has, and they locked down Texas. That's a top 5 team you had coming in there, and they struggled. They were in a stranglehold for a good deal of that game, and I never felt, as a fan, from that aspect, threatened on the South Carolina side.
No, and one thing I wanted to point out when we were talking about those stats for Texas really locking them down, Booker, I just mentioned 19 attempts, but yet on South Carolina's side, no one had more than 7 with Raven Johnson. So it really shows how well that South Carolina kind of disperses the ball, as we mentioned a few weeks ago, that it never seems like one of South Carolina's players really takes over the game. It is more a full team effort, and it seemed like Texas was really, really trying to get Booker to go off, and it just wasn't happening. And I think that's a good comparison to see where these programs, like how they approach these big games, where South Carolina is much more team-focused, and that's what makes them so good.
Oh, yeah, and if you're just going to frustrate the leading scorer from the other team, and they rely on that leading scorer a lot, which, Texas has a little bit. They've spread the ball around a good deal as we looked at the season for some games, but they really were trying to feed it to her, have her drive in, and she was just missing these shots. She was just running into our players, and the ball was hitting the glass too hard. She was hitting the underside of the basket. She could just not get it to go and was visibly very frustrated by the time you were getting further into the second half because you knew that you were never going to catch back up because South Carolina had already pulled by, ahead by so much, and you are struggling to score in the paint. And that's the main thing. Like, unless you're just really lucky and you just happen to have a crazy shooting percentage and long mid-range shots and three-pointers going in, the only key way that I've noticed that you're really going to be able to take advantage of South Carolina is if you can get a little bit more of those shots in the paint, if you can get those easy ones to go, and they were nowhere close to that this past Sunday, which was great. And yeah, just going back to what you said, Chloe Kitts poured in 11 points, Bree Hall a nice 7. She had a great day. She was 3 for 5. Pow with 11 points. Love to see that for her. And we're continuing to still go over the emergence of what will hopefully be more of the future for South Carolina in Camden. Freshman Joyce Edwards. She was 4 for 9 and she put in 10 points. So it's all been so good. And that's still something that we saw going even into the Alabama game. I want to keep mentioning this, Adam, because Joyce Edwards, again in this game, freshman phenom, leading scorer, 21 points, 7 of 10 off the bench. Love to see that from the freshman. Getting fired up here. She's doing great and just really continues to showcase the local talent that is just coming out of this area in the Midlands for women's basketball.
Yeah, you really have to love the hometown heroes.
So
having
good.
Somebody so close grow up. Of course, they obviously I don't know much about her, but like surely you have these local athletes that come to a big school, likely grow up fans of the program, and getting to produce at such a high level for them, become a potential future star for them, has to feel great.
Yeah, no doubt about it. It's awesome for this area, for the Camden community up there in good old Kershaw County. So I love to see it. It is a great thing, and it's something that as you can carry over, I think you could just take pride in a little bit more as a player, and that's something I've really noticed from schools and colleges. It's great if you can have a crop of talent, or at least a few talented players that are literally within driving distance, or even say right up the road from your school, or say NFL players that grew up a fan of a team, or just happen to be able to play for their hometown or home city. It can just mean a lot more. For some guys or women, maybe not so much, but others, it gives you a little bit more of that drive and passion. I certainly would attest to that. I would say, yeah, I definitely would. I feel like it would. And, that's something that's so cool to be able to see from, one of your own players. And, for South Carolina, a few, between her, Wiley Watkins, all here from the Midlands. So, I don't know what they're doing with women's basketball development in this region, but I don't know. Just keep doing it. It's working.
Yeah, it makes it real easy to root for as well. Of course, if you're a fan of the team, you're gonna usually pull for your players to do well. But it really does help. It's like, oh, I grew up in Kershaw County, and this new athlete now looking like she's gonna be a real brick on our offense, like a real centerpiece.
Oh, good building block.
A good building block. Thank you.
Oh, yes.
A good building block. Also from the same area, it gives you more of that connection to these players, and then that is at least from personal experience as growing up sports fans, you develop a connection to an athlete or two, and that's what really drives your allegiance to these teams. I mean, my favorite player from the Jets growing up was Braylon Edwards. Braylon Edwards wasn't he wasn't known for being a Jet, but because of that playoff run, that was my allegiance to the team, was a wide receiver that was there maybe 3-4 years. And you, of course, have college students a bit different. They're only here 3, 4, maybe 5 years under special circumstance.
Well, I think they're trying to get them a little bit longer of an extension as well. And then with NIL deals, you could easily see more of students now, especially big schools and talented athletes, staying 5-6 years. That might not be out of the realm of possibility, especially depending on the amount of money that is going to get thrown at these athletes, like South Carolina has with the Garnet Trust.
Yeah, and we've seen our own alma mater, Penn State, managing to retain 2,000-yard rushers with Singleton and K.
Yeah, you got a lot. If you have a lot of rich alumni, you have a big alumni base. It's just, eventually over time, you're going to see the ability to retain more of star athletes, whether it's football, whether it's basketball, those major sports that could bring your school a lot of money. It's just why take that step and go to the pros if you don't need to? Maybe, life is a little bit easier for you at school, and maybe you're still able to make a couple $1 million a year or more. These guys and women are getting some good money here. And the main thing is, too, you're allowed to have that exposure and get, on top of NIL deals, you can use your likeness. You can get sponsorships. You can actually have brands represent you. And, hey, why not?
Yeah, and we saw recently Colorado had that bowl insurance where we had that issue for a few years where seniors or NFL prospects were sitting out in bowl games, and it kind of brought up the debate. I'm like, should these players be sitting out? Is it their right to sit out, back and forth? And then now that they are kind of guaranteed some amount of money in return to ensure that if their careers are derailed by injury, they're getting reimbursed, getting reimbursed for it. It makes for a much more interesting landscape. And if we can see players, especially in women's basketball, who are so much fun to watch for longer periods of time, that's only going to be better for college basketball. Because if you have a player who, let's say, is averaging over 20 points a game, is like, man, I would love to watch this for, 4 full years. With NIL, that is much more likely than in years past, where they want to get to the league as soon as possible, because then they can start making money.
Of course. It's just going to be that paradigm shift that you're going to see a lot across the college sports landscape, and we'll continue to see how that gets shaped, if there are going to be changes with it as we go through the rest of this decade. But it's definitely a precedent that is being set here. And also, before we get into our Oklahoma preview, yet again another top 20 matchup for our Gamecocks. Just a quick shout-out going back to not the Texas game, the Alabama game. Speaking of local talent that we added in there. Full Wiley chipped in 16 points. Woo! Loving that from her. She's really just coming along here, and I just wanted to get that little tidbit in there before we move on to Boomer Sooner. Tipping over the schooner. Yeah, boo. Boomer Sooner is what we want to see as we go on into this upcoming weekend. Sunday, another game on ESPN, 3 o'clock, nationally televised, and with OU, how about we do the same thing to them? South Carolina can give them the same welcoming they gave to Texas for their slate, and let's dispatch them. We'd love to see that. And Oklahoma's been a little bit shakier than Texas, and I don't think they're as talented as Texas, but they do have a very good player that I think has the ability to upset South Carolina and throw off that balance a little bit, and that would be their center, Reagan Beers. First off, love the name. And also, fun fact about her is that she is originally from Colorado, and she might be 21 now. So, just with that last name, we were just talking about it before. And speaking of those NIL deals, just how funny it would be, any of those companies based out of the Colorado area. Of course, Golden, Colorado. You have Budweiser or Bud Light. Now, yeah, I'm not sure exactly when there's a fine line. That's definitely something I might need to understand more between any alcohol sponsors and student athletes. I don't know if there is that's not a line that's crossed, or maybe it is. But, again, last name Beers, it would definitely just be a no-brainer, especially because she is one of the best players in college basketball. She is very, very talented. She did an incredible job against us when she played for Oregon State. So, we actually got to see her play, and now we're playing her with Oklahoma. And between the transfer, a lot of folks were like, oh, man, I hope she comes to South Carolina. She was great, very, very talented. But she ended up as a Sooner, and she's averaging 16.5 points a game, 8.8 rebounds, and also between leading the team in those points and rebounds is no surprise leading the team in blocks as well, a little over 1 block per game. And she could easily have a few of those against us. And I'm sure that they're going to try to put a little bit of this game on her shoulders a bit more. So that is the key for me. Looking at this Oklahoma team, they are still very well rounded. They're a great team. They will be in the tournament. But if Reagan Beers cannot have a great game, then I just do not see this team overcoming us based on the overall talent gap. Definitely going to be a lot of pressure on her, especially with this game being in Columbia.
Yeah, and if you look at their last 5 compared to our last 5, they have dropped 2 games, one to Mississippi State and one to Texas.
Oh, yeah. So there you go. That's what I mean.
So,
and they blew the doors off of Mississippi State on the road. It was more in the second half, but they show that they can be a vulnerable team.
Yes, of course. So there is weakness there, obviously, and if South Carolina is getting used to this neutralizing star power, I would anticipate the same being done, hopefully, if they can keep that consistent down the rest of the stretch.
You have to just do that. That's the thing. Consistency here, and I want to see a bit more of that consistency as well from how you handled the Texas game. Locking things down in the paint. Have a game plan between whatever you're going to be going into this with to slow down, to stop Reagan Beers. That is going to be the key. The one other player I would say you got to watch out for is Peyton Verhulst. She's a senior, so she's going to have that leadership, and she's a senior guard who's been putting in 15 points a game, and also she leads the team in assists, around 4 a game on average, but also could easily have more than that if they're going to need to try and find a better scoring output, which against South Carolina, I'm sure you will. So despite the rest of the cast, it's no disrespect to the rest of Oklahoma, but slow down Peyton, lock down Reagan Beers in the paint, and you will be good. If you just have that recipe going into this, you have the home crowd behind you, you know that there's going to be a great atmosphere again. It's a top 20 matchup. It is nationally televised. It's on a Sunday. People will be fired up from that brunch they had earlier in the day. It's going to be a great day here in South Carolina, and I think that they will have that game plan to be able to topple over the Sooner Schooner and move on. And that's just the way I see this game going. And just because of what they did against Texas, that's just really given me a bit more of that confidence that especially if you're hitting your shots, you're getting the crowd fired up at home, and you have a better game plan to focus on a team that relies a lot on one player, that you can be able to settle in and just start to pile up some of the points and take advantage of that, because it's tough when you can only rely on 1 or 2 players in a big scoring sense.
Yeah, I agree. It does make it very difficult if your game plan is, if your game plan is just run through our high scorers, and if they're not having a good day, that could really mess up an entire matchup. And we've seen that happen across all sports. You take away one team's X factor, even if you just, not even completely shut them down, just limit what they can do. Saw it again with Penn State and we saw with Penn State and Boise State. They really they knew that offense was ran through Jonty, shut Jonty down for the most part, still had a 100-yard game, but limited him, didn't completely shut him down. That can disrupt an entire game plan, an entire system. So if South Carolina keeps doing what they're doing and just shutting down the number one and number two, I don't see how this would be a super close matchup.
No, me neither. And even though you see teams with a number by their name, it doesn't necessarily mean that they're going to be a tough matchup or they're going to be someone that can give you fits. There's definitely the potential out there just going over every roster, every team that, say just for a hypothetical sense, the number 11 or number 13 team in the country at this time. Now, oddly enough, going into this one, Oklahoma is 13. So let's say the 11th or 12th ranked team in the country. There could easily be a little bit more of a discrepancy there for South Carolina, depending on how the team is coming at you, depending on how they go about themselves, and also just how many players they can rely on. That is just so huge. And the recipe for this, it just does not look to be one that can overcome South Carolina. Texas tried it, failed. Oklahoma, I just wouldn't expect them to do any better, and that's just from an analytics standpoint. That's looking at it in that sense. There's definitely teams out there that can do better against South Carolina that I would be more fearful of, especially going into the postseason when it's one and done in the NCAA tournament or heck, even in the SEC tournament. I just do not see enough from Oklahoma here, and I really would assume that Dawn and her squad will have a plan to slow Beers down, and that should be about it for the day, as long as South Carolina's just hitting their shots.
Yep, I'm struggling over here.
No, man, it's all right, buddy.
I wasn't ready for this. Apparently,
we're getting through it together.
Yeah, but as I was gonna say. As you mentioned, Dawn, we just mentioned before we started recording.
Oh, yes, of course. Big news for Dawn, Staley.
Big contract renewal going through the 2030 season, I believe.
Next decade. How about that?
Yeah.
Or end of this decade, but yeah.
Whole half decade of Dawn, when what we've seen of her definitely seems like really building a legacy as if she doesn't have one already, just making one that much bigger over the next few years.
Of course.
Making it known this is where she wants to be for the possibly forever of her career.
Can you blame her?
Not at all. With the success that she's had here, you don't get coaches, at least in the college scape, it seems, you don't have these coaches that are usually in it for the long haul. Thankfully, at Penn State football, for us, we have had two coaches in our lifetime who seem to be in it for the long haul. But you see even these coaches who seem to fit where they are. I mean, we've seen Brian Kelly at Notre Dame, who just suddenly LSU.
There's this bridging that gap between football too. Just how funny it is too to have him at LSU and then just watching Notre Dame being in the national championship game. So it's just crazy to that sense. And some coaches, of course, a little bit more household names than others. Nick Saban, whether you love or hate Alabama, I'm sure more Gamecock fans hate Alabama. Yeah, I know, right? But you got to give credit where credit is due. It takes a lot to be an iconic coach, especially on the women's side of things. When you transcend that, just being a slightly recognizable face to, anyone would know you for the most part. If, they ran into you at a store, if they saw you walking on the street, if they see you doing an interview on TV, and Dawn has definitely transcended to that level, which is just so huge for recruiting for South Carolina, because she in her own sense has become a celebrity in that regard. And it's just a matter of being able to juggle that celebrity status and actually just being a really good coach. And if you can do that, it's going to pay dividends, and it can easily help your school win national championships at the college level, because it's just only going to help bring more positive attention to your program, and it's going to make people with talent, women with talent in regards to this team, want to come here, whether it is from, one of our hometown heroes that we've already seen or, a player across the country.
Yeah, and as a school, as a program, if you have a coach this special, like Dawn is, you have to do everything in your power to make sure that they that they want to stay. And I feel it's been made very clear that USC wants Dawn Staley to be their coach as long as possible, because obviously, why wouldn't you? But you do have programs who don't realize the talent they have. So when it's a situation like this where it seems very clear to you and me, it's like, obviously, why wouldn't you sign Dawn Staley to an extension or a renewal or whatever? some programs don't do that. It's not as clear to them. They think they can outsmart something, or they know something else about like a different a different name to lead their team at like a cheaper cost. We've seen it across all sports owners or just programs in general who think they are ahead of the game, and it comes back to bite them.
Well, yeah. From top to bottom, when you look at some of these programs, and it's something that also to that point does happen. Whether it is more of the professional football landscape, NBA, WNBA, I haven't seen, of course, too much of a discrepancy, but you're going to see a little bit more of that in college sports, maybe not realizing what you have and how much coaches or even coordinators maybe have impacts on players or assistant coaches. And just to be able to have a perfect recipe and people who are bought in, who want to give all they can to a program, who fall in love with the program, with the athletes, mean a lot to their families, mean a lot to their fans. It is a very special breed, especially for someone that's going to be around for a long haul. So love to see that Dawn is for us. Very happy about that extension. And here we go. We're just going to be looking on to a positive future. And it still all starts with this season because we still have a long way to go. But this team is right there. Another national championship is for the taking. And between what we're going to see with Oklahoma this weekend, still got that huge test looming coming up. That's going to be that huge matchup, I'm saying it again, against LSU. But it just is. It's going to be seismic. And also want to make that point as well. A bit of news that's come out from Colonial Life Arena and the university. They'll play host to ESPN's College Gameday. I hate that it's a Thursday. They're only going to be having them set up shop, I think, and doing a broadcast. I think they might have some segments on ESPN throughout the day, but it's going to run 1 hour before the game. And it's, of course, this upcoming next Thursday. And it's going to be from 7 to 8 p.m. The game is at 8 on ESPN. It's like, it's not going to have the same energy as the morning broadcasts. It's a little different on the basketball side of things, but still nice to have more of that national exposure and just an extra hour long of coverage from ESPN of our women's basketball program from Colonial Life Arena. And that's going to make a great evening, a very fun evening for fans. I'm just sad it's not on a weekend, because you just don't have that, rise up, get up, hey, it's game day here from Colonial Life Arena, South Carolina. But it's still a great thing to note.
Yeah, there is that different energy you have with that morning game day. You get up, have your breakfast while they're, previewing the games ahead, telling you a little about the school's history, the matchup history, whatever it is. But still, to get on that national stage, obviously national champions, a few of the last few years. Stumbling over myself. I'm falling apart live on broadcast here. My goodness, help me.
We won't get it in post, by the way. We won't.
We're leaving this in.
We won't get it in post. Just putting that out there.
Yeah. Not that they need the exposure, having won a few of the last few championships. However, it is still important for a school, especially, in college, where recruiting and exposure and brand is so important to keeping your winning going. Having College Game Day, even if it is headed more towards the evening, the prime time era or the time slot, it is still going to be exciting, and I'm excited to see how that looks. I've never really seen a College Game Day for basketball. I think either the last episode or the one before, I asked you, I didn't know that even existed.
It's a little bit less celebrated. It doesn't get the national attention. It doesn't get as much of the social media attention either, like the football one does, because you just don't have as much of that exposure as football does. It is still the big money maker here in the United States. College football is always going to be king. It's going to be tough for any range, men's or women's basketball, to just overtake that, just because there's so many football fans out there, the oversaturation. But we still love it, and it is incredible. I mean, it's hard not to enjoy college football for what it is, especially because you have the capacity to have so many more fans at sporting events. You're playing in stadiums, not arenas. That's always going to be the unfortunate shortcoming with basketball, is you can only have, maybe at the most 15 to 20,000 fans at a game, as opposed to, 70, 80, 90, 100,000. But that's fine. But yes, going back to that, it hasn't been as celebrated as much, but it's still a great atmosphere that can be garnered. I've seen, and it was more so slated towards men's games for a good point of time because even ESPN or Fox Sports, as much as they might want to try and celebrate things a little bit more now, or CBS too, any of the major networks, it didn't really celebrate the women's game as much, but at least they're trying to give it a bit more of its due now, especially wanting to have a college game day type setup and atmosphere around these really big matchups. So yes, that's going to be 1 hour before the LSU game. Last year was here, but it was for, as I told you too, the Georgia game, which was just a little bit more of a lackluster game because Georgia, their women's team, kind of had a down year. It still ended up being a good game, but it was not a hyped game. So there wasn't a lot of people that showed up for that game day. I'm sure there will be for this because this is huge, and it's become a bit of a rivalry between South Carolina and LSU. So we'll see how it looks. I still hope it's going to be great. I just wish it was in the morning. That's just personally, a thing for me. Love to always see that with college football. It's such a traditional thing. And, just having people come out and celebrate a huge game in the morning, knowing you still have the whole day ahead of you. But either way, it's a point I wanted to make into this podcast as we keep rolling along with this SEC slate. And then, of course, Mr. Adam, we will be breaking down that yet again, huge game against LSU as we look on to next week. But got to get through Oklahoma first.
Yeah, as they say, 1-0, keep your eyes on the game right in front. But
That's
it is
right.
It is a little tempting, especially as fans, to just, that number 5 matchup's coming up soon. So it's really, really exciting. And, of course, a really, really huge game that it could really dictate how the rest of this season goes for both schools, depending the outcome.
It is. It's a pivotal game. I'm very happy that they are able to have it here at home, but it's just going to be something where you go on and you look into these things. You have to, of course, try to just seize that day, especially knowing, going into this game that you probably will be the first team that has that big opportunity to knock off LSU because they are ranked 5th in the country right now, but they are undefeated. They are 19-0. We are 17-1. We still have that little hiccup against UCLA, so we will eventually break down that one. So looking forward to that matchup because it is going to be a crazy, crazy atmosphere, I'm sure, against the Tigers, and we'll see how that all pans out. But right now, let's focus on Oklahoma. We got them coming to town 3 p.m. on Sunday, coming up very soon. That is tomorrow the 19th, and that game could still be caught on ESPN. So we got a lot to roll on to, a very long season hopefully ahead of us, and always love to keep supporting our women and this Gamecock basketball program. So thank you so much, everyone, for joining along here. Please, if you've made it to this point of the podcast, like and subscribe to us here on YouTube. It is only going to help us expand, stay on YouTube, and eventually work to go to a video platform, which we still want to get to. It is in the works. It is in the process. And we, of course, will see you next time.